Hi, I'm Bill Gates, and this is your crash course in music theory based on this piano that I got for free off Craigslist. Because if you're patient, you can get pianos, exercise equipment, and trampolines all for free on Craigslist. Life hack number one. Life hack number two is how to cheat at the piano. So I've labeled all of the keys here because I'm teaching my 5-year-old how to learn piano on this exact same piano. And the keys on a piano can seem numerous. Like if you ever have Midjourney try and make a piano or another AI try and generate a piano, it's always messing up the keys. Its eyes boggle and it's just alternating black and white. But the alternating black and white is not actually true. You can see here, there's two white ones next to each other, and here, there's two white ones next to each other. So what does that mean? Well, basically, each octave, and that's what you call when the waveform gets twice as fast. So this is a C, and this is a C. Those are the same note in the system of notation, only this one is twice as fast as this one. And the reason why there's 12 semitones in between them is because they basically took the frequencies and divided them like you would a clock, cutting it first in half and then into quarters, right? And then from there, each quarter has 3 divisions, right? So it's like a clock. And the reason that is because those ratios sound good together. Now, the notes on the piano are not exactly equal divisions. For that, we'd have to be making a video on the harmonic series. It's an interesting thing to learn about, and you should learn about it, but that's not what we're learning about today. Right now, we're learning about how to cheat at piano. So the number one way you see people cheat at piano is to play only the black keys. And there are many people that the only song they know on piano goes like this. Sometimes people will even play it with their fists. It can be fun to play pianos all different ways. I definitely encourage you to approach it as a rhythmic instrument because a lot of the best electronic music might only involve 1 or 2 notes played really repetitiously, but in a nice rhythmic groove that rocks. And you see, people like Niels Fromm, for example, he's basically like finger drumming on the piano when he plays, and it sounds awesome. Like you don't need to be like shredding every single note on the piano to make it sound good. Approach it rhythmically, play with your fists, have fun. So the reason why playing all black keys works so well as a cheat at piano is that they've basically selected only 5 of the semitones in an octave, and that makes it a pentatonic scale. Penta meaning 5, tonic meaning tones, 5 tones in the scale. But where you count from, like where you count as the root of the scale, is going to change the flavor of the scale. Here's starting from C sharp. The black keys are usually referred to by either being sharp, which is higher, or flat, which is lower than the white keys, which have the normal letters on them. But if this is the first step of the scale and then it ends there, you'll get these 5 semitones. Right? And that's one vibe of scale. But you could also play a melody that starts and ends on this one, which would be D sharp or E flat. And that chopsticks song is basically doing that, starting and stopping there. That's the most popular one of those scales. But you could also start and stop on this one, or this one, or this one. Each one's going to have different vibes, but any combination of those black keys is always going to sound pretty good. Like, check it out. Even just pressing all of them at once doesn't really sound bad. If you place adjacent semitones like this, that's going to sound pretty sour to most people, but there's not really any combination. Like, that's those two, when you play two next to each other, that's the closest thing that's going to sound bad. But if, let's say, you play two of them close to each other, but then further away there are other notes, it actually sounds kind of like adult and cool and advanced to have a little bit of sourness mixed in with a larger chord. Right? So if you just want to pretend to play the piano at a house party, all black keys cannot steer you wrong. Like, if you just stick to the all black keys and make up stupid lyrics about your friends, people will be like, you are a piano player. That was a great performance. And hey, Bob's your uncle. You don't even have to practice, right? So if you just get to know the flavors of like where you start and stop, how that interacts with like the tone of the scale, some of them will feel happier, some of them will feel sadder. All black keys is a great place to start. And if you use the start and stop note to choose your flavor, in Ableton or on your synthesizer or sampler or whatever, there's a feature called transpose. And transpose will move every note up by a number of semitones. So if you wanted to play this flavor of pentatonic, the E to E flavor, but have this E note be C, you would transpose down 1, 2, 3 semitones in your synth or sampler or whatever, and then the MIDI will all come out in the scale you want. So these black keys get you pentatonic scales without having to practice. The transpose lands you where you want in terms of your target key for the song that you're writing. But what about the white keys? Surely they are more important. They're the ones that got the letters, and they're not considered sharp or flat. Well, other than the inherent racism of this whole paradigm, the white keys are, more important because they are basically designed around the major scale. The Western music loves major scales, especially historically. They love major scales. It was forbidden to play certain intervals, like minor intervals, especially the flat second, which is like... that interval was considered like a scary emotion for the church, and they like didn't like it. It's pretty funny, but whatever. Anyway, so these major scales are basically like all of Western music is built around the major scales. So the most obvious one would be C major, which is C to C, all white keys. And if you're trying to practice piano and you want to just make your hands learn how to do the piano, the first moves to learn is like crossing your thumb underneath your first two fingers as you're playing a scale. So if you're ever wondering how people can do these like crazy runs up and down the piano, it's because they basically made it automatic for their hands to go 1, 2, 3, 1. So it's going, and then I'm back on my thumb. So if you just practice that cross maneuver where you're like crossing your thumb under, so you go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Practice that maneuver to get your hand used to doing runs of notes and not running out of fingers. And then the other thing is to practice doing that maneuver, starting and stopping at different root notes. So I'm going to start and stop at this A now to give us the minor scale that is relative to C, which is the major scale that the whole piano is built around. So A minor, starting and stopping on A, only white keys. So that is the same exact 7 notes, these 7 white keys, only counting them differently gives you a minor, right? If you count them B to B, you get what's known as a Locrian scale, and nobody ever uses this. And that's because this chord doesn't sound that great to end a chord progression with. Like if you go, like this feels like incomplete, unresolved, extra sad, you know? So it's just not a very satisfying chord to land on when you end. Right? Whereas 4, 5, 1, see, if you're in C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So if you go 4, 5, 1, F, G, C, making chords, which is like 1, 3, and 5. Like that feels more satisfying as a resolve, is what that's called, when you release the tension and get to the home chord. That's like the Windows 98 chord, like welcome to Windows, right? So but if you start D to D, this is a minor scale that I really like. Like this A to A minor scale is the kind of, you know, natural minor, or like classic minor or whatever, and it's kind of like gothy a little bit, you know. Whereas like the D to D minor scale, right? The 4, 5, and the 1, and that sounds like this. Like that sounds really nice, and it's, you know, all white keys, D to D. This E to E all white keys, this is what's known as a Phrygian mode, and this is really good for metal or for anything that you want to give that spice route vibe to. This is like what Western composers, like let's say you get, you know, a gig scoring the next Mummy franchise film, right? You're probably going to want to involve this first semitone above the root note, that flattened second that the church doesn't like, right? You'll often hear that anytime they're like, oh, it's the desert in a Hollywood film, it'll be like, and those semitone intervals, that's kind of like the juiciest interval in any scale for making melodies around. And if you like kind of like let's say you have a melody that is on this E and you're going and changing just one note of the chord, like you'll hear that a lot in pop music where they're just going back and forth between one semitone on one of the notes. And it's just really like, it just sounds smooth, and it sounds like they're like creating a narrative, and you don't really have to change what your hands are doing that much. So you'll, you know, anytime you get one of these adjacent semitone intervals in a scale, make the most out of it with your melodies, because it's an easy change to make, and it just sounds kind of like nice and like in the pocket and like smooth sounding. Just like, I really like it. But this E to E scale that has that flat minor second, this is kind of like where it's at for metal and stuff. Like Dorian, D to D, that's kind of like what you'd write like you know, a rap song in, or a rock song. But this like, right, like that interval is a juicy one. So I like that Phrygian scale a lot. I write in that Phrygian scale a lot. F to F is, I think, Lydian it's called, and it's a lot like the major scale, but not quite as corny as the like Windows 98 Ionian major, and that is this one. The 4, 5 of the 1 sounding like this. right? You've heard that in lots of songs. Mixolydian is like this G to G mode. 4/5 and the 1 sounding like this. Right? It's cool. I like how it's got like a minor root, but it's still got like major vibes. Or sorry, it's got like a major root, but it's still got minor vibes in a lot of the chords. Like, because that 5 chord, that is a minor chord. This would be D major. So it's got a minor 5 chord, a major 4 chord, and then major root chord. So that's kind of cool. This A to A minor, and then that 4/5/1 resolve sounds really like nice in this, and it stays minor in this minor scale. Like notice that in the Aeolian minor or the Dorian minor, the 4/5 and the 1 is minor, right? Those are all sad vibes. The emotion doesn't really change, right? And then if you're counting D to D, 4/5/1 would be, right? So it's like major, minor, minor, all right? So if you're in the Aeolian minor, I think a lot of people like the Aeolian minor because the 4/5 and the 1 stay minor, and a lot of people like the Ionian vanilla major scale because the 4/5 and the 1 stay major. And then this would be relative to here, right? So that's why a lot of songs of the scale degrees, you'll see a lot of songs that are going like, and you can just feel that major 1 chord coming from, longer you keep that going, it like builds this sense of suspense. You'd see the Beatles doing that a lot, where they'd be like 4/5, 4/5, 4/5 for so long until the audience is like, give us the root chord, ah! And then they would do it, and people would scream and cry and freak out. But that's all it is 4/5/1. You know, every pop song is like that. You'll sometimes hear this 6/4/1/5 chord progression. So the 6 is the minor chord, that A minor chord. 6/4/1/5 is like the chord progression from Pachelbel's canon. That's in like everything. Like it's got this nice circularity to it. There's a lot of shared notes between the chords, right? And then yeah, that chord progression you just get, it gets used in everything. Like that's like if you're trying to make like a big summer hit, that would be the chord progression to reach for. So you'll hear me using these things like I'm saying 4/5/1, etc. That is what's known as scale degrees or relative notation, and that's actually way easier to understand than trying to remember how many semitones are between each of these keys. Like between E and F, there's no semitones, but between D and E, there's this extra semitone there, right? And like remembering, which is a whole step, which is a half step, all these different formulas and stuff is kind of a complicated way to do it. I like just like all white keys for pentatonics, pick your mode to pick your flavor and use the transpose, or sorry, all black keys for pentatonic scales. Pick your root to pick your mode and then transpose, or all white keys for more full-on scales with 7 notes, and then same thing, just use the transpose to do it. And then that way you never actually have to like memorize any scales or anything. It's so much easier to deal with. And then I just focus on like finding the rhythm of the melody a lot more than on like trying to have this like super virtuoso piano performance, because that's just like, that's not what I do. You know, that's not what I do. Like I like virtuoso technical producer stuff, but I'm not like a virtuoso pianist. There's nothing wrong with being a virtuoso pianist. I'm just not one, and I'm not trying to be one. You know, I'm just trying to enter my melodies into my DAW, and this helps a lot. And just always remember, music theory is, it can be as simple as you want, or it can be as complicated as you want. If you want to go all the way and make it complicated and crazy for yourself, go for it. If you have fun, if it inspires you, jump in, right? But if you just want to make music and you don't want to like think about all that stuff or read tons of books or practice all day on the piano, doing either all white keys or all black keys and then using the transpose to land in the key that you want, that is so fast and easy, and you can just get going right away and go. Okay? But start thinking about relative notation, because there are certain truths of the way the chords go together. Like, you know, going from 1 to 3 always sounds a little weird. Like, whereas like 1 to 4 sounds fine. 1 to 5 sounds fine. But like, you know, you don't often hear this 2 chord. You might hear the 2 as a melody over the 1 chord. Right? Like that 2, because it's a little bit dissonant with these ones, because it would land here if it was an octave down. Right? But having an octave above the chord can work, but not like the whole 2 chord. The whole 2 chord is a lot. It's like kind of clashy, because if it were superimposed over here, right, it'd be too much adjacent semitones. That said, one of my favorite chords is D, E, and F. I don't know what it's called, but just these 3 together with a lot of sustain. Here, I'll play the sustain pedal. Oh, you better get ready for some dubstep. You know, like that's just like the UK dubstep suspense chord. It's just D, E, and F. Right? I don't know if anyone who uses that chord ever refers to it by its proper name. I don't know what its proper name is, or even if it has one. Like, I guess, I don't know, maybe like that'd be like a 13th, but then you're missing the 5th. I don't know. It's not important. You know, what's important is having fun and making music that you like the way it sounds. If you want to learn theory, go crazy, learn it all, whatever. You know, it's like geeking out on modular. Like, not everybody has to geek out on modular, but if you like modular and you find it makes you want to make music and makes it more fun for you, go for it. Same thing with theory. Like, you can make amazing music that's like doesn't even have melodies in it. Some of my favorite music is just like sounds and drums, you know, or like weird drone music that's not in a key. You know, like, you don't have to use music theory. But if you want a quick crash course in how to get up and running, that's what you do. All black keys for pentatonics when you want a more limited range of tones. Choose your start note to choose your flavor. And then all white keys for full scales. Choose your start note to choose your flavor. And then if you decide that you want the same flavor but with a different start note, use a transpose. There will be one in every synth and every sampler. A lot of DAWs will have one on like a global track transpose on a given channel. Or in Ableton, there's a device called pitch in the MIDI devices, and you just put that on and transpose it. And yeah, it's basically all you need to know to cheat. All right, peace.